Thanks for joining us this week on Email Geeks at Home Drinking Coffee. Join your hosts Chris Marriott and Paul Schreiner each week as they talk email marketing, life, purpose, faith, but mainly email marketing. If you're looking for some normalcy in these crazy times, you've come to the right place.
All right, welcome back to Email Geeks at Home Drinking Coffee. I'm here. This is Paul Schreiner. I one of the hosts here with my co-host Chris Marriott, and then
good morning.
We also just had David Inman join midstream, which was somewhat on purpose to see how he would handle, the ebb and flow of.
And the pressure of being live and you Paul, you and I are old pros, but Dave's
old. I mean, we're 3 episodes deep, Chris.
Right. Dave's just a producer, behind the scenes guy until today.
Right. And to be fair, the first episode was just us talking. Right.
Right. To be fair, but one of the reasons we wanted Dave on here today,
David Inman,
our producer, is to publicly berate him. Frankly, last week, you may recall, we had a sponsorship of my condo that I'm trying to sell.
Right,
and
because it's not a good time to sell condos.
Right, and so it sponsored the show. And David prepared a sheet of paper that if you were paying attention, the condo, and you go back and look at it, the condo address is 144, which is what I said, 144 East Avenue. David provided me with a sheet of paper that had 114 written on it. So
this is unexcusable.
As I said to Paul earlier today, David, I have people lined up outside the door who want to be producer of our show. These mistakes are unacceptable, and we wanted to just get you on and maybe you want to offer some sort of apology to our audience or explanation. I mean, the stage is yours.
I appreciate the opportunity. As we all know, an apology can only do so much. A lot of time and energy has been wasted because of me, and there's really no way around that. I apologize. I wrote something up last night, but I'd rather this come from the heart. I will resign effective immediately.
No. Paul and I already agreed. Give you another chance. But you're walking on very thin ice. We just want you to know.
Yeah, it's about power and control for us,
right.
David. I mean, the talent. We have to carry a certain level of prima donna as talent. To carry on a certain. Anyway. I'm good. I would also like to point out, David, that on Friday, so I have the opportunity to get to work with David on a daily basis. And on Friday, he was playing with the idea of long-term facial hair. And today, here we are, no facial hair. David, the final question, what's going on? What's going on with your face there?
Well, once again, an apology can only do so much. When in quarantine, one tends to experiment, and some experiments are going to be failures, some of them are going to be successes, and that one, as you know, Paul, was not really one to celebrate, one to continue.
I was on the goatee train. I'll say it loud and proud. All right. Well,
I can't let that go. A goatee is merely hair on your chin. We use it all the time incorrectly. The mustache and hair on your chin is actually known as a Van Dyke. So please, Paul, in the future, if you mean goatee, fine. But I think you meant Van Dyke.
Is that after Dick Van Dyke?
No, some Dutch painter, I think, was a Van Dyke.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.
Paul, do a little research on that, and maybe we'll have you on again next week, and you can report back on goatee versus Van Dyke.
This sounds like a good plan.
Good.
All right. Hey, David, thanks for joining us. You're welcome to hang out here online during, I think we call it the intro.
This is the intro.
Yeah. But I wanted to talk to Chris. How was your weekend? We haven't done that one yet.
Yeah, weekend, but days blend a bit together here. Even the when you're binge watching a show, every day is the show's available. But I had a good weekend. The weather here in Chicago is stubbornly in the 50s and 40s, so it's not spring yet. But went on a 6-mile walk yesterday with my dachshund. I know David has dachshunds. We took Newman on a 6-mile walk, and he loved it. So it's good to get out and get out of the fitness room and actually out in the fresh air. How about yours? How was your weekend?
I'm exhausted. Yesterday, well, let's go all the way back to Friday. We put in vegetable gardens. We put in an herb garden on the deck. We had soil delivered and, distributed said soil. We limbed trees, and not small ones, but good sized ones. They were over the driveway dropping leaves, and I just got tired of raking the leaves in the fall. So
I hear you.
It's time to cut that tree up. But here's the thing, and I know this is going to sound weird. We had our video church, our online church service on Sunday. And, at first I was a little bit apprehensive about sort of just the venue, the format. We're used to showing up and checking our kids into children's ministries and all the things, right? And I just, for me yesterday, and I guess this is a pitch a little bit towards a faith community in general, as opposed to necessarily my church. But I'll tell you what, I had a fantastic experience. I came in mad because the kids were building forts out of the couch and screaming and poking each other, and I came out feeling hope. I mean, what you were talking about feeling stuck and every day is the same. It's like Groundhog's Day every single day. That's how it's feeling right now.
Yep.
And there was something about the topic. We talked about anxiety, depression. We talked about all of these pieces that come with it. And it wasn't so much that there was just this thing that made me go, okay, we're going to get through this. And it made me go, man, we have a platform. If I can encourage everyone watching, find your place, find your community. It will help during this time. If you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like, man, I just don't, every day is the same and I'm alone, which is very real right now, find a community of people. And man, you're welcome to join mine. You're welcome to join a million different communities, especially with this online version. Even if it's temporary, you don't need the membership card. No one cares. So there's my soapbox. But for me, that was a pretty spectacular. So then I went from that, and this is where you're going to laugh at me, onto what I like to call a prohibition run, which is exercising outside where maybe you're not supposed to go. So either state parks, which I did not do. If the Signal Mountain Police Department is watching, I did not do that. But I did find a little trail along a creek on a map that had an old logging road attached to it. And so I was able to sort of run along this creek. I saw a wild turkey, saw a fair amount of wildlife, and again, pretty restorative for me. So with all the yard work, it was nice to have a break.
Good. Actually, you and I know we are coming up against Dave Allen joining us, but Prohibition Runway reminded me. I went to speaking of Prohibition, I went to our local liquor store, or as I say, my sanctuary, right before the weekend. And I got there, and it was what was going through the door, and then there were a couple guys standing there, and they said, you can't come in for 10 minutes. It's 65 and older shopping time, so you're gonna have to wait 10 minutes. Well, I pointed to the shoes I was wearing and said, You don't think I'm 65? And folks, I'm not. But I thought the shoes would get me in. Did not. They were not fooled. They said,
"Oh my goodness!" I would think
get back to your car.
A lock.
Get back. I thought so too. I thought it would be a lock. I just pointed to my shoes, but did not fool them.
There was some cussing in our house this weekend as well, Chris, from the WHO, the World Health Organization, came out with a recommendation that we stop selling alcohol. And
yeah, that.
I know, it was like, no, that's just
nope.
You'll have to pry it from my cold dead hand right now. All right, so hey, let's wrap this up. We're about to have our friend Dave Allen join us.
President CRM Division at Zeta Global.
There you go. All right, we'll see you in a little bit, huh?
All right. Hello and welcome to another edition of Email Geeks at Home Drinking Coffee. I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, Paul Schreiner. And this week, our guest is David Allen, who is President CRM at Zeta Global. David, delighted to have you here this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Absolutely.
So as we do every week, we share what we're drinking. And Dave, I know it's in the afternoon where you are in the UK. Very exciting that we have somebody. I was on tenterhooks all weekend knowing that we have our first international guest. And so he's from the UK, he's from the UK and he's in the UK. So he might be drinking tea. We should let him talk. But I am drinking, Paul, as usual, Santo Domingo coffee from the Dominican Republic, where you would have been recently if we weren't under lockdown. But that's
thank you for bringing that back up.
There you go.
I'm drinking a local brew. It's a Tanzania blend from a local shop called Mayfly, and then from our mug sponsor, which you'll see in the show notes, the link.
Great.
So you gave the game away, Chris, because you said it's coffee. So I got a coffee mug, but since I am in London, this is actually beer in here. So this is
innovation I can get behind from our friends across the water.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Well, I asked for the first question. I'm going to stick with that, and Dave basically. Oh, actually, Dave, you've known Chris for some time.
Yes.
I hear there is a story that is worth telling and hearing about how you two first met, and I believe, just going in, Chris has denied vehemently that whatever the story is took place, but it's worth hearing, I believe.
Well, Paul, Chris and I have been friends for quite a long time, and my story relates not so much to the first time we met, but to a particular moment that we worked together. So I was at Axiom. I was running the Axiom European business. Chris was out of the New York office running all the digital work for Axiom. And we did a client event at the fancy Ritz Hotel on Piccadilly. And our speaker was former President Bill Clinton. This was about 2007, I think.
And this sounds like a speaker Chris would love.
Yes. Well, and so far the story is accurate.
So, and I like to tell you that, Chris will I'm sure will have a rebuttal for this story. But I think my version is, if not entirely in line with the whole truth, is the funniest. So,
which is the most important.
Exactly. So essentially, this is the story of how Chris got to be where he is today because I saved his life.
What?
Yeah, I saved his life. So we were having this event for our top 30 clients across Europe. It was an intimate event at the Ritz Hotel, less than 50 people, and the former president. Everybody. So since Chris and I were part of the Axiom leadership team, we were obviously at the event. I was the host and the master of ceremonies, and so Chris got up to speak. Now, obviously, the tension and the anxiety of about to meet the former president of the United States, who everybody acknowledges is incredibly charismatic, even more
Yes.
so than Chris Marriott, that tension and pressure got to him. So when he stood up to speak, he was standing at the podium, and I was right at the front, and I could see beads of perspiration appearing on his brow. He started to go pale, and he was about to crash headlong into the floor when I leapt out of my chair, grabbed him, saved him from fracturing his skull,
Wow.
and gave him some water so that he could compose himself and return to this, very eloquent presentation that he gave.
Well, and before Chris, you respond, which I'm sure you will, I just want to say, Dave, not all heroes wear capes. Thank you for saving his life that day.
Yeah, it's my gift to mankind, I feel.
Well, most of that story is accurate, but it leaves out a very critical element, which is the fact that the day before I'd flown over from the United States on the corporate jet with the head of the company, and without boring you with too much detail, the airlines on the jet were frozen by ice that had formed, and airlines are what allows a jet to bank like that and like that. Because our airlines had frozen, our plane could not bank, and so there was a very good chance that we would crash on landing. In fact,
the story got better.
The chairman of the company. What I'm trying to say is, it was a profile in courage that I was even able to get up and speak, having a near-death experience the day before, not at the podium, but on the corporate jet. And in fact, again, we didn't die. Dave did help me, but I think, again, the real story is the profile in courage that I was able to get up and speak at such a big event after nearly dying the day before.
So
it sounds legit to me, Chris. And again, Dave, thank you for saving his life so that my co-host today could, bring some fantastic content. So far, we've got great feedback from the email marketing community, email geeks. To have someone like yourself who's been in the game for a long, long time and really piloting the ship right now for a lot of folks. Man, what a huge opportunity. So I don't know, Chris, you want to start us out with the first real question?
Yeah. So Dave, when we spoke last week, you reminded me that you have already retired, I think you said twice, which is one more time than Michael Jordan. And for you kids out there, he was the greatest basketball player ever to play in the NBA. Paul, you can't counter that.
No, he has retired twice. Jordan did.
Oh, right. But
and if you include baseball, he's retired 3 times.
Anyway, Dave, like Michael Jordan, Dave, is it the love of the game that keeps bringing you out of retirement, or is it something else?
Yes, I suppose that it is. My analogy is probably with maybe with boxing. George Foreman came back out of retirement famously, and I think it's that the people that you get to work with, the exciting things that you get to work on, getting to work with folks like you and Paul, it's too much of a draw. It's too exciting. And the world is changing. I mean, notwithstanding the current crisis with COVID, the world is changing, and the world of marketing is changing so dramatically. And I was reminded of this recently. There's a very smart young lady that works with us in New York who said to me, we were just chatting one day, and she said, "Have you always been in digital marketing?" And I said,
Paul?
I think we lost him. There's a good chance, both this being the apex of what he was talking about right now. Also, there's a good chance this will end up in the bloopers video, Chris. So, you know what I mean? He's back.
He's back. So
we lost you there for a second, Dave.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you lose me or did you lose Chris?
No, we lost you. And you were about to make, I think, a very salient point, which was, you said that somebody in New York asked if you'd always been in digital. and we didn't get the answer. So if you could repeat that.
So this was a young lady, a smart young lady that works with us, who said, asked me that question, and it suddenly dawned on me that, and I said, well, there hasn't always been digital marketing, and she said, what do you mean there hasn't always been digital marketing? But she entered the workforce in 2016. But the point of the story is really that the incredibly rapid pace of change, and that's the bit that's intellectually stimulating and fascinating, and it's hard to resist.
I get it. I mean, marketing drives I think part of it is both being a master of your current craft, but also a master of the ability to read and understand, acknowledge new trends coming out, and adapt quickly.
Right. Great. Well, and we're all having to adapt right now. And so let's talk about that adaptation, Dave, and what it's meant for Zeta Global. I know you personally have a big office in New York, but your company also has a big office, and your teams are used to, workplace collaboration. So how are they managing now that they're working remotely? In fact, I mean, you're even stuck in London, as we've pointed out several times, when you normally are in New York. Well, not stuck in London. But so how are your teams coping with working remotely and the changes that's required?
Incredibly well, actually, Chris. The nature of our business, we're in tech, and we are a dispersed company anyway. We have big offices all around the world, so we do a lot of communications through video conference, or always have done. So we were prepared for this, but we've introduced a lot of different things to make sure that people to replace the sort of the bonding around the water cooler or the face-to-face. So we have a number of activities. We did a talent show on Friday.
Oh wow!
We do virtual happy hours, those kinds of things. So actually, in a way, the level of engagement has gone up. A lot of things done before were done by conference calls, but not necessarily video conferencing.
Right.
So actually, I feel there's been a lot of engagement.
Great. And with that in mind, does return to normal, or when we return to normal, do you think Zeta will go back to doing things the way they did before, or are some things along that line? Do you think some things are going to be permanently changed in the way you do business, even after we go back to normal?
So the phrase that everybody uses is the new normal, and I think that there will be a new normal, as there always are after major events like this. And frankly, Chris, you go back a long way. You go back to I don't think you go back as far as the Depression, but you've had a lot of you've weathered a lot of shocks in your long esteemed career.
When I was born, dogs couldn't vote. I mean, I go back that far.
Oh my goodness. So well, you've aged well, Chris. So the world is what
That's
we've
up for
experienced.
debate.
I think things that will definitely change. So before, people would get on a plane and go to see a client, and sometimes you might have a large team of people doing that. Well, I think we've proven now that video conferencing is an accepted way to do those things. So I think that will change. But also, what's happening during this, and what we're seeing with our clients, is that this acceleration to digital has just gone up a notch.
Right.
And I think Chris attended. I'm not sure if you did, Paul. We had a webinar on Friday with our two founders, our CEO David Steinberg and our vice chairman John Scully, to talk about that acceleration. And we're certainly seeing that with all of our clients. A lot of changes in place. So there will be. Well, who knows when this crisis will be over? And I don't think there will be a single date. There will be
right.
phasing in of that, but there will be a new order of things.
Sure.
Okay. And talking about your clients, what other changes have you potentially seen in the way your clients are doing business? Again, I mean, this is an email marketing show or digital marketing show, and email is the crux of what your team does. Are you seeing, have you seen your clients, are they emailing more? Are they emailing less? Are they emailing the same? how have they reacted to it, and what kind of advice are you giving them if they ask for it?
So that question goes right to the heart of things, and the answer is we're seeing all of the things that you're talking about, depending on the business that the client is in. So some of our clients are large retailers where brick and mortar stores have closed down, things have moved more digitally. They've been having to rethink how they interact with their customers. People in the sports business where there's no sporting activity, how do they keep their fans interested during this period and engaged, so that when the season starts again, how they will re-engage. We have other clients across the company who are in businesses which are actually doing quite well during this crisis. So food delivery, for example. So we run the gamut of companies that are experiencing this crisis in many different ways. I think what's happening though is that our clients are rethinking about how they deal with their customers. How do you understand what's changed in your customer base and how it's affecting their buying behavior and what they'll be doing in future. So a lot of what we're seeing right now is because of some of the assets that we've got is a sort of introspection on their customers and rethinking how they engage and how they do that in a more personalized way than perhaps they have done hitherto.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and I think you made a really interesting point because you're right, and not every client is impacted the same. Again, it really depends upon their business, as opposed to the fact that they're all sending email with you. It's what their business is that's driving the response. All right.
Can I jump in here, Chris, and switch gears just a little bit?
I was just about to do the same.
Dave, one of the things that I think has really driven me in terms of starting this podcast oddcast up was really sort of trying to provide some practical, tangible answers on how we, an email marketing community, can respond to a really, I want to say, miserable situation. How do we find some purpose, some hope, some direction coming out of this? And one of the things that we kind of talked about a little bit on Friday, you and I and Chris, was centered around mentoring. And you've been in the game a long time, meaning digital marketing, just the whole professional working world. And you had shared just your value you place on mentoring. Is this a good time for an email marketer to get a mentor? How does one find one? What are the things that they should be talking about? How do they improve themselves in the midst of this, based on your experience?
Okay, so the answer to the question is, should somebody have a mentor? I think it's a really good idea to do that. Some people might do that, or they might have that naturally occurring with someone that they know, or some family member or friend that they look to in times of change or trouble. So I think it's a really good idea to have someone that you can talk to outside of your normal day-to-day activity. And I think particularly at this point, because there is so much change that is happening and will happen. There's certainly unemployment, and I'm sure there's unemployment in marketing departments. The need for realizing that your customers are acting in different ways than they did before, so you're going to have to reinvent yourself. And as much as people say they like to change, actually that's a difficult thing for us humans to do.
Right.
So having someone that you can talk to about what you're seeing and what you're experiencing, and understanding how to do that in a safe environment, I think is a very good thing to do.
And that person, you can be brutally honest, right? Like, meaning, is this? I'll guide the question here. A mentor, is that typically someone who is from within your organization, or would you recommend it from someone outside your organization?
I think it really. I don't know that where that person is necessarily the key thing.
Okay.
I think it's someone that you know that you can trust, that you know respect your conversations from a confidential perspective, but also that they have the credentials and the experience that you need to call on. And you don't need to have someone who, you don't need to just have one mentor. You can have multiple mentors depending on, you know, their
Scandalous.
background. Yes.
I'm just playing the field right now, playing the mentor field. I don't want to settle down. But just to dial in one more piece, you said this is something you can be brutally honest about where you're at. You can share your fears, your anxieties, your concerns. Is this something you need to worry about filtering and how they see you?
Well, actually, I think what you've said, I think, is the most important thing in mentoring, at least in my experience. And that is that it's, you know, you can have intellectual conversations about the market and the job and the day-to-day activity. But the thing that's most important is the person's own self-awareness and how they're dealing with those circumstances. So I think one of the things that a good mentor is able to do is actually recognize or help the person recognize what it is that they are dealing with and how they're reacting to the stress. Right now, stresses can be good and it can be bad. You know, good stress is things that help us perform to our maximum ability, you know, competition and so forth. But a lot of stress can be bad, particularly in times like this. So I think one of the things that a good mentor will help somebody do is develop greater self-awareness, understand what makes them tick, what are their trigger points, what gives them anxiety, what gives them pressure, how do they recognize those things so that when those things occur, they're able to take a breath and think about it and react to what's really going on rather than how their psychology or the psyche is being triggered by those events. And I think because when you're in a stressful work environment, if your level of stress is high, you're not necessarily going to be able to perform to the maximum level of ability. You're not necessarily going to be able to take on board the things, the signals that you're getting around you and how you interact with other people. You know, and one of the challenges about not being face to face with people is sometimes over email or over other communications, you might say or do things that you wouldn't if you were face to face.
We laugh because I've never done anything. I'm not a keyboard commando. I don't know what you've heard.
Well, you know, let me jump in here a little bit because I think, you know, I mean, and I've said I've told this story before, Dave. You know, yeah, you saved my life. But the story I really like is a mentoring experience where you don't even remember the conversation. You weren't formally, you know, we weren't formally in a mentee relationship.
Mento. I think it's a mento, Chris.
I think it's a mentee.
And if you have multiple, it's mentos.
Mento, fine. But we had dinner one night in London, just the two of us, and you know, you had a frank discussion with me, and where basically you said, "Listen, you're a smart guy. You can accomplish a lot in this company, but sometimes you can be a jerk." Now, you didn't use the word jerk, but you know, what I heard was that, you know, my methods maybe were not as effective as they could be if I read the room better, if I didn't, you know, if I just, you know, sometimes thought through things before, you know, shooting from the hip, and potentially was less argumentative. And, you know, I really took that to heart. And I went on, I think, to be quite successful there. And again, you know, that was an example of you know, a one-off sort of mentoring experience where, again, we were not in a formal mentor-mentee, but you took the time to tell me something I needed to hear, and I took the time to listen to something that I didn't like hearing, but, you know, introspectively said, you know, he's right, and I need to do that. And I think, so my question, that's a long wind up to, you know, do you think that really good managers by nature are sort of always in a coaching or mentoring role, even if it's not a formal relationship, or that it's the responsibility of a really good manager to have these, you know, take these opportunities to have these hard discussions with their teams?
So it is the responsibility of all managers and leaders to help develop their teams, and not just through altruistic reasons, but simply because as a manager, the performance of whatever you're managing depends on the caliber of the people you've got. And my experience is that people generally have much more capability than they realize themselves, or it even manifests itself. So your job is to help that person understand what they're capable of and what they can do. And so as you were talking there, and you were reminiscing about that time we had dinner, it made me think of some work that I do outside of my formal work. And I do a lot of work with a charity in the UK. It's called Leap Confronting Conflict, and it's an amazing charity. They do incredible work. They help young people turn their lives around. And essentially, what they work on is, what they recognize is that there is conflict in our lives, good and bad conflict. But it's how you deal with that conflict in a way that, because if you're interacting with somebody, and what happens is sometimes the listening skills go out the window. And I have to thank Chris on, over dinner that evening. He asked me, and he listened. He really listened. And sometimes it's hard to do that. Yeah. So one of the things that's really important is to work hard on your listening skills. And there's that old adage, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, because we should listen twice as much as we speak. And sometimes we don't, you don't follow that. And right. So, encouraging people, helping them develop is helping to understand, because you might be in a situation where you're feeling some pressure or stress, and that might trigger you. You might react in a way, or you might feel some pressure. Whereas if you seek to understand, as Stephen Covey said in his famous book, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, seek to understand and then be understood. For me, that's been a tip that, once it finally sunk into my thick head, is a really, really helpful tip. And I think Chris demonstrated that in that conversation that evening. He was seeking to understand, and then took it on board, and then his career just carried on.
Yeah. Well, and I think you, Chris, beautifully sort of framed the circumstance where, and we have certainly a lot of managers who are email geeks that are participating, and they're looking for ways to cultivate their mentees or reports, whatever the right word is. Those are the good ones, right? We also have folks that maybe don't have such a good manager. They're reporting up. What's been this? I would push this out to both of you, because I respect both of you a great deal. So someone that has maybe a manager that doesn't have great management skills, should they be managing up, or should they be looking elsewhere for someone else who might be able to help them with some of that?
Wow, that's a fascinating question, Paul. So I think there's two aspects to that. And I think the answer is both, actually, as I think about it. They should be looking for someone to help them, who they can talk to about the situation that they're dealing with their manager that they might be having difficulty with. But also, I think with the manager that they've got, if they're having some challenges, how they deal with that manager and how they interact with them. Because if that manager they perceive that manager is not listening to them or not helping them, maybe they can try some other techniques to find a way for that. So this is a very simple technique, but you can say to somebody that you're perhaps in conflict with is, so rather than say when you or criticize them, you can say to them, you can turn it around and say, look, when you say those things, I'm interpreting what you've just said to mean this about me. Is that correct, or am I misunderstanding? Right.
A listening check.
It's a simple technique, because if you say, when you do that, you make me feel this way, it's kind of threatening. And,
right. Yeah.
Whereas if you just change it around to say, when you say this, by the way, this is very good in if you're having arguments with your partner too, though it doesn't always work. But anyway, but it's
that never happens to me, Chris. Do you?
No, never. Bliss.
I'm sorry, deaf ears right now, Dave. I'm not sure.
But
I totally railroaded that and took that away. You were in a stride, and here I am. I fear intimacy. That's what I think. What we just discovered.
Well, I mean, I think, perhaps a lot of us do. So, but I think that, that in that situation, dealing with the manager in a way that you can find a way to at least get some common ground to understand, and there are some techniques that you can do to improve that. But having someone else that you can talk to about the challenges that you're facing in a safe environment, and figure out how to address some of those challenges you're facing. And we've all been in that situation. And I've no doubt in my career, if you can call it that, is that there have been a lot of people who've worked for me who thought this guy's, I wasn't doing a good job. There's no question. Now, was I being that way intentionally? No, I wasn't. But I think that opening up that dialogue would have changed the dynamic.
Sure.
Great advice. It's interesting when I always tried. Most companies require that the annual review, and Axiom was no different. And every 12 months, HR was like, you got to sit down, you got to talk to people. And my attitude was that if somebody's finding out in that annual review what I think of them, then I'm a horrible manager. I mean,
right.
My response to HR was typically, I don't need to sit down. They know what I think of them, and they know what they think they need. To me, it's a constant. As a coach or as a manager, the idea is to be, you don't wait 12 months to tell somebody what you don't like about what they're doing, and as somebody reporting up, you don't wait 12 months to find out what that person thinks of you. And to play off what Dave said, I want to know what my direct manager thinks of me all the time, because again, things fester. I mean, if you're waiting those 12 months, then things are typically spiraled out of control.
You're so right, Chris. In fact, a lot of big companies now are doing away with the annual appraisal for that very reason, because what's happening is, if it's the old adage, if your only tool is a hammer, eventually everything looks like a nail. If your only tool is an annual review, that's what people use and nothing else.
Yeah.
So doing away with that is good. And back to this self-awareness thing, sometimes people find it difficult to give advice or rather counseling. So if it's easier to praise subordinates, but not necessarily give them tough conflict. So therefore, it's both important for the manager and the person being managed to have an awareness of how, that self-awareness. So if they find that difficult, understand what that emotional response is and attempt to overcome it. Because, sometimes managers aren't very good at giving constructive feedback.
That's a great point.
I'm going to pile on to something you said earlier and this here at the same time, because it was around conflict, right? I think, earlier I was joking about sort of fearing intimacy. I think, and yes, of course I do. We all do, right? But also fearing conflict, right? That is a thing. No one really likes it. No one goes headlong like, today is conflict day. I'm going to tell you everything that you have wrong with you today. Like, that's not, I mean, that's a regular process at Audience Point, where we just sit down and we just tell people everything going wrong. No, not really. But what I did want to say is, one of the things that helped me was recognizing that conflict is a big word. It is what it is, right? It's two people, and if you take it and you say, this is a thing, like, we have a conflict, it's not personal. I don't dislike Chris. I just think he talks too much during the podcast, right? And so rather than taking it personally and saying, Chris, you're a horrible person, just calling it, this is just tension, it's pressure. And if you acknowledge the pressure or that tension, now we can sit down and have that conversation without it erupting into feelings, right? It's that self-awareness you were talking about, Dave, saying you need to be able to hear and you need to be able to share.
So if you take your example, how would you, what's the best way to engage Chris? So you could say, well, look, Chris, when we do these things, it seems to me that you're trying to hog the limelight. You might say it a little more gently than that, but it feels like you're trying to exclude me from it. That's what. Yeah. Folks say, well, no, that's not the point at all, Paul. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to make sure that I make my full contribution. So you're coming at it from an understanding of, so you can own your feelings and Chris can own his, and then you can have a more constructive conversation. So I'd be very happy to do
mediation or something.
Yeah, mediation.
I feel like this is suddenly couples therapy, and we don't have the problems that Paul's talking about.
Right. No, Chris, listen. This is probably not the right place to air it, but I mean.
Yeah. Right. All right. Moving along. I think we beat that one to death. I think it might be
good stuff.
Good stuff. No, great stuff. I think we might be coming upon the time of the lightning round, Paul.
I believe so.
Okay, so this is how we end our show each week, Dave. And it's a lightning round where we try to get into the psyche of our guests, though Paul was the victim in week one. So I have 5 words. I'm going to go through each one, and you need, as I say the word, the first word that pops in your head, you say after it. And there's 5 of them, so we're going to go through 5. And we typically dissect one of your answers that is most unusual. Now, I'm very excited because this is the first UK edition of the lightning round we've had.
That's true.
I'm very excited. So, okay, first word. Let's get started. Curry.
Annapurna.
We might have to come back to that one, Paul. But pub.
Sharps bitter.
Ooh, okay. Fox.
Hunting.
That's what it. Okay. Royalty.
The Queen and service.
And last one, colony.
1776.
Okay. Canada was the preferred answer there, but we'll... All right. Let's go back to the Curry answer. I want to zero in on that one. I'm not even sure what you said.
Annapurna.
So it's a mountain in the Himalayas, but it also is the name of the Indian restaurant near where I live, or where my house here is in London. And it's a place that I go to on a regular basis. But as soon as you said curry, my mouth started watering, and I kept thinking about this restaurant because it is exquisite Indian food, and I've been going there for 20 years.
I love this. Now, I would also say this is probably a generational thing, Chris, because everyone else who's under the age of 30 is probably thinking Steph.
Oh, right. Well, but it was the UK edition. I think
that is true. That is true.
If I hadn't labeled it the UK edition, I think Steph would have been an acceptable answer, at least from someone in the US.
I do want to tell you guys something, though. 1776. I think that I'm a huge fan. I mean, I've spent a lot of my life working and living in the US, so I'm a huge fan of the United States, and have a lot of American friends. And I think to demonstrate that commitment, you need to know that on the 4th of July last year, I went to see Hamilton in London. So I think that demonstrates.
Oh, in London. Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good, Paul. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah. Basically, I kind of like to leave final thoughts to our guest. Any final words, Dave? Share with our huge email marketing audience. If you could leave them with one thing, what would it be?
So this quote is attributed to Winston Churchill, and I'm not sure if in fact he did say these words, but let's give him the credit. And he said, "Never waste a crisis." And so there's there is a massive crisis right now, but let's use this time for reflection and think about what we want to do differently as we come out of this, and be a better individuals, better at work, better family members, better friends, and better citizens of the world.
I love this.
I do too.
So now a little more nuts and bolts stuff for our viewers, our listeners. Like and subscribe to this little thing. We are marketers, and this is how we're sort of gauging the efficacy of the overall thing. Do people want this? Do they like it? We kind of committed to an 8-episode run. and let's see where we're at. And so, you know, the more you engage, the better you tell us this is something that you like and you want more of. Or, you know, is this something we should spend our time doing something else? Feel free to send emails to emailgeekscoffee@gmail.com.
Yep.
We like that. Comments, Twitters, all the things.
And I'd like to then, in closing, thank again, Dave. You've been a great friend for a long time, and you were a great guest, and we really appreciate you taking the time to sharing your thoughts with us today. I think some very great advice was provided, and we appreciate your candor.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
guys.